Hello, my name's Jenny Burney, and this is my colleague, Christy Spears-Neumeister, with me today. And we are both educational psychologists who specialize in the study of gifted children and gifted education. Our work is centered around helping districts find all the students who have advanced potential and helping schools to create the educational experiences that will develop that potential into high performance. What we're going to do today is to examine what is needed to be successful and the role of high ability education in the development of success.
Okay, when we think about how to best educate our high ability students in Indiana, the question then becomes, is it enough just to be smart? Does that automatically equal being successful? And when we talk about successful, we mean the person is doing something that is actualizing their talent. It doesn't necessarily correlate with financial success, but something that they feel that's personally meaningful to them and is using the talents that they've been given. Well, when we've asked this question to ourselves, we can come up with many examples of people that we know, students that we may have known in the past, or I'm sure you can come up with examples too, who were plenty smart going in. They may have had great test scores and good GPAs in their high school experience, but sometimes when they got to college or even a graduate program, they hit a wall and they were not able to be successful and to translate those talents into a career that was personally meaningful to them. So then we can say, well, what are the components that are necessary for success? If we can think of people that we know that were not successful, what components do they need? And we've come up with these what we refer to as the 7 C's that are necessary to be successful in a global environment. The first is just base content knowledge in the area that you're going to go into. We still always need that, but there are additional skills and attributes that are necessary for success as well. We have communication and collaboration definitely that are necessary, as well as critical and creative thinking to know what to do with the information and the problems that we've been given. And finally, we can't underestimate the importance of the affective traits of having the confidence as well as the commitment to be successful.
But this is really nothing new. These are things that we've known for a long time that are the necessary components for success. These are also actually the elements of gifted education. And when we look back into the history of gifted education, we can say that this has been recognized for a long time. Leta Hollingworth was the first one to actually try to put programs into schools that would develop the talent of students with advanced potential, and she was quoted in the early 1900s with regard to students in the New York City public schools who were exceptionally able. She was saying these children really have nothing to do in school, meaning that the curriculum was too easy for them. And she was saying, how can these children develop the power of sustained effort, respect for the task, habits of steady work? The work ethic that is required for ultimate success, she was noting, was not being provided by the regular school curriculum. When we looked at Jim Gallagher, who is a leader in gifted education and former president of the National Association for Gifted Children, in the 1960s he was noting the importance of teaching creativity because of a rapidly changing world. No one would disagree that the 1960s were a rapidly changing world, but that's the same thing that's true today. He was saying it's important to train the gifted students so that they're problem solvers, not just problem staters. Still true. And Joe Renzulli noted that it's not just ability that makes someone successful or that can produce new ideas and new inventions that will help us all. It's a combination of things, that task commitment, creativity, and ability, that will produce advancements for our society. So this is not something that's additional. This is not something that can be taught in a 30-minute enrichment period, in schools. This is something that has to be embedded within the curriculum and the school experience for children K through 12. We talked today about problem-based learning or STEM or 21st century skills. These are not really new a new thing. These are attacking the same things that we're talking about as the 7 C's that are necessary. Any one of them by themselves is not enough. It is the collection of all of these skills, and again, it must be embedded throughout a student's school experience in order for them to develop these skills and components that are necessary.
Okay, so we can look at these 7 C's individually and ask ourselves how we're doing in each of these areas in terms of preparing our students for success. And we can begin here by looking at content and how we're doing in terms of graduation rates.
When we look and we think about, it's not just about graduating from high school, but it's going on into attaining a post-secondary degree, and we can say, well, how is the United States generally doing, or Indiana in particular, with making sure that our students have the post-secondary degrees that are required? Well, if you look at the right-hand column here, you can see that internationally, at least among this group of nations, in this organization, you can see that the United States ranks third in terms of the percentage of its population with a post-secondary degree. All right, that doesn't look too bad, but when you look a little further into the data, you can see, as you look in the far left-hand corner, when it is banded by age group, it is the baby boomers, those who are in the 55 to 64-year-old age group, that had the highest relative preparation for success, and that was with 38% of the population. But we know that that age group is going to be moving out of the workforce, and they will be replaced by these people that are in these next age bands. And so, as you can see, even though the percentage remains relatively stable of the United States population that attains that post-secondary degree, you can see that our relative position when compared with other nations has fallen. What this means is we've been satisfied with the status quo, while other nations have recognized the increasing importance of this degree of education, and they have bumped up their attainment of post-secondary education to the place where you look with the 25 to 34-year-old age group, and you can see that even though we are still at 39%, all of these other nations, 55, 54, 53%, they have made their population have a greater level of preparation.
And if you look at Indiana, down at the bottom of the graph, you can see that we're just at 34%. So we even lag behind the United States as a whole. So then that begs the question, when we look at this graph here, we can see what's kind of going wrong. Why aren't we getting more people to be successful? And in this particular amount of statistics, we see that we only have 26% that end up getting their BA or their BS. Well, let's back it up. We can see if we start with 100 ninth graders, then we only have 82 of those that are going to graduate from high school. And out of that group, we have 52 that enter college, but look, only 35 are there the second year. And then finally, 26 are earning their BA or their BS. Well, when we try to figure out why they can't be successful once they're in college, we lose a lot of kids from those who enter to the amount that finally graduate, and that's even giving them 6 years to graduate. We can see that it may be that they were not prepared to be successful at the college level. And this graph that we put up here shows the percent of Indiana high school graduates that are enrolled in remedial courses in college. And what those courses are, they don't get credit for them toward their major, but they need them in order to be successful in later classes. It's usually a math or an English class that they need to take. And you can see that for those that are at four-year institutions, nearly a quarter of those students still need to take remedial courses. And when we look at those who have entered two-year institutions, it's as much as 70%.
So let's try to figure this out. What is it that is required in order to be successful in college? And by that we mean that you can persist until you graduate. Well, Clifford Adelman did some research in a study called Answers in the Toolbox. He did this research for the U.S. Department of Education. He's a Harvard researcher, and he looked longitudinally at those students who graduate within 6 years of beginning, and to look back at their preparation to say, what was it that differentiated those who graduated from those who didn't? And he could say, well, it was a matter of rigorous curriculum. What does that mean? Every high school says its curriculum is rigorous. What is rigorous curriculum? One marker of that is success in math beyond Algebra 2. So that would be at the trig or pre-calculus levels. Okay, now, do we have that kind of success? I'm not sure that we do. A lot of our students are not taking the math that is needed. Another marker for rigorous curriculum is advanced placement. We can see from this graph, it is you almost double your chances of graduating from college if you have been successful on an AP exam, and by that I mean have scored at the level of a 3, 4, or 5. Not because the advanced placement coursework itself was necessarily what was the preparation. It was the fact that you could take a large body of information and be able to study it and be able to pick out what was important and be able to write coherently on those topics. Those are the skills that are needed in college, and if you can do that successfully, as demonstrated by success in advanced placement, then you are indeed prepared for college. So how does Indiana do in terms of advanced placement? Well, when you look nationally, this graph shows you the performance on the 2010 advanced placement results of various states. You can see that Indiana, over to the left, had a little more than 10%, actually 12.2% of the Indiana high school graduates had taken an advanced placement exam during their time in high school and scored at a level of a 3, 4, or 5. That's been increasing each year, and Indiana should be applauded for that. Our goal of the Indiana Department of Education is that we could get to 25% of our graduating high school seniors attaining that level of performance. You can see that that's above the average for the United States, and you can see that other states, by comparison, some have already exceeded that goal, and others are certainly farther in their development than Indiana. But it's not just about advanced placement. It's not just about what happens in high school. Actually, what some additional research found out by the ACT was that if students are not on track by 8th grade, there's almost nothing that can happen for them in high school that will prepare them. This is really something, the pipeline has to be started in kindergarten. We have to embed these appropriate experiences in a student's education from the get-go. Another thing that we can say is that relates to the importance of vertical articulation is that when we look at the two kinds of reasoning abilities, verbal and quantitative reasoning, that if we would begin that vocabulary development early, Latin and Greek roots and stems, school-wide, learning how to construct essays from the beginning, that we would begin to prepare students for those end goals. This is not just a high school proposition. The same with mathematics. If you could begin the study of mathematics earlier so that Algebra 2 occurs before the SAT, or that they have practice with rigorous problem-solving techniques, that this, in a systematic way, will develop the verbal and quantitative reasonings which should allow us to perform better on SAT, on AP, and in terms of preparing our students for college success.
Okay, we just talked about the importance for content, but we know that there are other skills and attributes that are necessary for success as well. And we can look at these skills of communication and collaboration, critical thinking, and creative thinking, which we collectively tend to group as the 21st century skills, and think about how we're doing in terms of preparing our students with these skills. And this is a picture of the Library of Congress, housing vast amounts of information, but all of that information will be available on your iPod, on your phone, or some device you can fit in your pocket within the next 3 years. When we think about it that way, it is clear that we have left the information age. The information is there already. It's at our fingertips, literally in your pocket, on your phone. We have now instead entered the innovation age, and this quote really provides evidence for that. Students of today will experience more new inventions in their lifetime than all the discoveries from the beginning of recorded history to the present.
What this really means is that these people are the only ones with job security.
Everybody else needs to be more flexible and more adaptive if they want to succeed. And we can see as we look at the picture of the future of the jobs, 2 to 1, they're going to require a post-secondary degree. And that's because the jobs that will be available are going to be non-routine, requiring more analytical thinking, more communication and collaboration, and requiring math and higher level executive functioning. So if we think of that 66% and we go back to thinking of how few we're educating at the post-secondary level in Indiana, we can see we really have our work cut out for ourselves. Okay, what they are requiring are these 21st century skills. Can they communicate effectively? Can they collaborate well? Do they have critical and creative thinking skills? Well, a group of students in the United States, high school students, put together a short presentation in which they tried to address that question. Do they feel like their schools are preparing them with 21st century skills? So let's watch their interpretation here.
Now, this was an important thing for us to consider. This was a high school project. Not only did they demonstrate content knowledge by creating this, but they also gave a great presentation concerning the use, the embedding of 21st century skills. When you think about it, this was an authentic assessment. Did they collaborate, this group of students? Were they effective communicators of their point? You know, did they use critical thinking? Did they use creative thinking? It's all there. And that's what 21st century skills are about. That content and that type of student work.
And this was likely quite motivating for them to work on something like this, because we know that our students on average spend about 7.5 hours per day interacting with technology. They're using their smartphone, their computer, television, or whatever. So if we know this, then the question becomes, how do we incorporate technology in our classroom so that we can engage them and so that they do find what they're learning more motivating, that we can make it more interesting to them?
This is really about switch, which is changing things when change is hard. And we can know that just because we have data that indicate that students are not including or developing these 21st century skills, are not able to fulfill the demands of their employment, doesn't mean that we can necessarily easily produce schools that will change to produce this. You know, it's a matter of rational versus emotional. Just because you have the data doesn't mean that you can change. Anybody who's ever thought about the importance of good nutrition or the importance of exercise, you know, can know that it's not enough to just know that you should do this in order to carry it out. So the message here is, when you're trying to change your school to incorporate more of the 21st century skills, do not try to change too much at all, all at once. Do not try to do too much. The key is to look for small victories. Do things that make it easier to do the things that are needed. Begin to infuse the 21st century skills, and we would argue that the place to do that would be with your high ability students first, and then to branch out from there.
Okay, going back to our 7 C's, we've talked about the 21st century skills and content. We're left thinking about these affective traits of confidence and commitment. And by commitment, we're really thinking about how do we motivate our students. A good book came out a couple of years ago by Daniel Pink called Drive, and it was talking about motivation in terms of the workplace. But the ideas that he has in this book directly apply to education. He talks about autonomy, mastery, and purpose as methods or ways to motivate people in the workplace. But we're going to watch a little clip that summarizes the main points of this book. And I want you to think about, as you're watching it, how can we use those same principles of autonomy, mastery, and purpose to motivate our students in the classroom?
Fact, money is a motivator at work, but in a slightly strange way. If you don't pay people enough, they won't be motivated. What's curious about, there's another paradox here, which is that the best use of money as a motivator is to pay people enough to take the issue of money off the table. Pay people enough so that they're not thinking about money and they're thinking about the work. Now, once you do that, it turns out there are 3 factors that the science shows lead to better performance, not to mention personal satisfaction. Autonomy, mastery, and purpose. Autonomy is our desire to be self-directed, to direct our own lives. Now, in many ways, traditional notions of management run afoul of that. Management is great if you want compliance, but if you want engagement, which is what we want in the workforce today as people are doing more complicated, sophisticated things, self-direction is better. Let me give you some examples of this, of almost radical forms of self-direction in the workplace that lead to good results. Let's start with this company right here, Atlassian, an Australian company. It's a software company, and they do something really cool. Once a quarter, on a Thursday afternoon, they say to their developers, for the next 24 hours, you can work on anything you want. You can work on it the way you want. You can work on it with whomever you want. All we ask is that you show the results to the company at the end of those 24 hours in this fun kind of meeting, not a star chamber session, but this fun meeting with beer and cake and fun and other things like that. It turns out that one day of pure, undiluted autonomy has led to a whole array of fixes for existing software, a whole array of ideas for new products that otherwise had never emerged. One day. Now, this is not an if-then incentive. This is not the sort of thing that I would have done 3 years ago before I knew this research. I would have said, you want people to be creative and innovative? Give them a freaking innovation bonus. If you can do something cool, I'll give you $2,500. They're not doing this at all. They're essentially saying, you probably want to do something interesting. Let me just get out of your way. One day of autonomy produces things that had never emerged. Right, let's talk about mastery. Mastery is our urge to get better at stuff. We like to get better at stuff. This is why people play musical instruments on the weekend. You got all these people who are acting in ways that seem irrational economically. They play musical instruments on weekends. Why? It's not going to get them a mate. It's not going to make them any money. Why are they doing it? Because it's fun, because you get better at it, and that's satisfying. Go back in time a little bit. I imagine this if I went to my first economics professor, a woman named Mary Alice Schulman, and I went to her in 1983 and said, Professor Schulman, can I talk to you after class for a moment? Yeah. I got this inkling. I got this idea for a business model. I just want to run it past you. Here's how it would work. You get a bunch of people around the world who are doing highly skilled work, but they're willing to do it for free and volunteer their time, 20, sometimes 30 hours a week. Okay, she's looking at you somewhat skeptically there. Oh, but I'm not done. And then what they create, they give it away rather than sell it. It's going to be huge. I mean, she truly would have thought I was insane. Okay, it seemed to fly in the face of so many things. But what do you have? You have Linux powering 1 out of 4 corporate servers in Fortune 500 companies, Apache powering more than the majority of web servers, Wikipedia. What's going on? Why are people doing this? Why are these people, many of whom are technically sophisticated, highly skilled people who have jobs? Okay? They have jobs. They're working at jobs for pay, doing sophisticated technological work. And yet, during their limited discretionary time, they do equally, if not more, technically sophisticated work, not for their employer, but for someone else for free. That's a strange economic behavior. Economists who look into it, why are they doing this? It's overwhelmingly clear. Challenge and mastery, along with making a contribution. That's it. What you see more and more is a rise of what you might call the purpose motive, is that more and more organizations want to have some kind of transcendent purpose, partly because it makes coming to work better, partly because that's the way to get better talent. And what we're seeing now is, in some ways, when the profit motive becomes unmoored from the purpose motive, bad things happen. Bad things ethically sometimes, but also bad things just like not good stuff, like crappy products, like lame services, like uninspiring places to work. That when the profit motive is paramount, or when it becomes completely unhitched from the purpose motive, it's just, people don't do great things. More and more organizations are realizing this and sort of disturbing the categories between what's profit and what's purpose. And I think that actually heralds something interesting. And I think that the organizations that are flourishing, whether they're profit, for-profit, or somewhere in between, are animated by this purpose motive. Let me give you a couple of examples. Here's the founder of Skype. He says, our goal is to be disruptive, but in the cause of making the world a better place. Pretty good purpose. Here's Steve Jobs. I want to put a ding in the universe. All right? That's the kind of thing that might get you up in the morning and racing to go to work. So I think that, that we are purpose maximizers, not only profit maximizers. I think the science shows that we care about mastery very, very deeply. And the science shows that we want to be self-directed. And I think that the big takeaway here is that if we start treating people like people and not assuming that they're simply horses, slower, smaller, better-smelling horses, if we get past this kind of ideology of carrots and sticks and look at the science, I think we can actually build organizations and work lives that make us better off, but I also think they have the promise to make our world just a little bit better.
Okay, I hope you enjoyed watching that. It's always, no matter how many times I've seen it, it captivates my attention. It's an interesting and creative way to present that information, but it leaves us with a question that I hope you'll continue to think about, and that is, how can we use those principles of autonomy, mastery, and purpose to motivate our students in the classroom?
We tried to think about this in the broader scheme of things, and we reviewed the popular press to see what people were saying outside of education about talent development. And a commonality found there, too, was that it takes more than just talent, which is what we've been saying all the way through this presentation, it's not enough to just be smart or naturally athletic or musically inclined. It takes commitment. It takes a work ethic. It takes a willingness to put in the time needed. It takes practice. And it's how we practice that's important. It's deliberate, targeted practice in the zone, right where you need to improve, going over and over your mistakes and getting appropriate feedback so that you can advance. It is commitment to the future and to doing things correctly and to doing things right.
Okay, the last of the 7 C's to cover is confidence, and we have to ask ourselves, well, how do you develop confidence? Where does it come from? And I think this quote from Sylvia Rim answers that. She says, "The surest path to positive self-esteem is to succeed at something which one perceived would be difficult. Each time we steal a student's struggle, we steal the opportunity to build self-confidence. They must learn to do hard things to feel good about themselves." This is so true. You can't just give somebody self-confidence. You can't just say, be confident. You have to give them opportunities to do things that are difficult and for them to be successful doing those. And when we pitch the curriculum at a level that is too low for them, and they learn that they can always do well and they never have to work hard, they're doing well, but they're not developing any confidence. So then when it becomes challenging, they don't have that confidence to be able to work through that challenge and be successful.
So here we are. We're back to the 7 C's. We know that these are what they need for success. It is through embedding the principles of gifted education that we can map out the experiences for these students to be certain they've gained these elements through a planned set of experiences. And this has to occur K-12. These things are important for all students, but the standard grade level curriculum and instruction must be modified in order to attain these skills. Now, changing a school is difficult. But if these elements are not embedded anywhere for any students in your schools, you might think about beginning with your high ability students. These have always been the principles of best practice for gifted education. Teachers of the gifted are more likely to develop curriculum on their own, and these students are more likely to be already passing accountability measures. It's safe to try something new with these students. It's logical that it is within your program and services for your high ability students that you can model the development of the 7 C's. Embed the 7 C's in those classroom experiences and grow your experience for all students from there. It's not enough to just be smart. Success in a global environment comes from the attaining of the 7 C's.